And he said, I'm a witness to both of those, and which is a good thing. And I think there's a place where impartation is important, that we're dealing with these things. How do you manage your finances? Do you save money? What's your philosophy in terms of managing your personal finance? Do you take care of your health? Do you take care of your, the simple things that you need to have? These are impartation things that we deal with leaders. It's not just that you know your theology, you can preach, you can lead people, but these other facets that allow you to sustain your leadership. How many of you know if you get sick, you can't lead? Hello? But very few times we deal with these issues, or if you have marriage problems, it's just a matter of time before you realize you cannot sustain the leadership that you were called to do. And finally, there's the matter of internship. An internship is now putting a person on an on-the-job basis of training. Case in point, I was sharing this with Pastor Chris last night, and I've been doing this now for a little over 25 years of identifying leaders, because this is how we grow. In other words, our church grows because we have 300-some pastors who oversee churches. And identifying them is very critical, because if you make that wrong first step, and I've made some of those wrong first steps because I looked at the gifts of the person. I looked at the ability to communicate very well. I've looked at the talents rather than looking for the right things. But the case in point is I changed the way I started looking for leaders when I realized that. I remember one particular story I was telling Pastor Chris last night. Is a young man named Tony Aguilar. And it happened because there were a stream of high school students who were getting saved at our church. And I was so impressed at these high school students, because they were not just getting saved, they were getting saved, getting discipled, and they were reaching out to other high school students, that they became a mass in our church, a literal mass of people in our church. And we had to start a service just for them. When we started interviewing the kids, we tried to find out, where did you guys come from? And they all got traced back, one generation after the other, to a man named Tony Aguilar. And I said, no matter what happens, we need to find Tony Aguilar, because we are identifying him for what Pastor Jeffrey said about his fruitfulness and not his talents. Most people look for the talent. I'm looking for the fruit. Tony Aguilar arrives. He's a 5-foot, bald-headed, scrawny, thin young man. He sits in my office and I said, how did this happen, Tony? Explain this to me. He said, I went out and reached out to the students, and they got saved, and I discipled them. Another guy got saved, and he discipled them, and I grew them slowly. And after a while, it became obvious that Tony had a call from God, and so I asked him, Tony, what do you do for a living? He says, I'm a dishwasher at Chow King. It's a fast food house. And so it tells you a principle that identifying leaders is they can come from anywhere. A leader, not everyone is going to be a leader, but anyone can be a leader. And so Tony, I said, would you be willing to go back to school? Because in our context, you can't be a pastor, or we can't hire you unless you have a degree. Would you be willing to go back to school and take a course? Doesn't have to be a very big course, but what is it that you want to learn? And we're willing to scholar you. And he went back to school, graduated, and now Tony is one of our most prolific pastors in our church. Identifying is very critical. Instruction is critical. Impartation, and then Tony eventually wanted to get married. And I said, Tony, before you get married, how many of you know you need money to get married? And Tony, you need faith. Every time somebody gets married, when all my 3 sons came to me and said, I want to marry this girl, they always say, do you think I'm ready? And I always have just 2 questions. I always say it's really very simple. I said, number 1, do you love her? Because that matters. Hello. In other words, is this the face of the person that you want to look at every morning? Because that matters. If you wake up every morning and you don't like that face, you're not going to have a very good marriage. People often ask me, why do your kids keep marrying pretty girls? Because I told them to. Because you want to wake up looking at the right face. And the beautiful thing is not because for other people, for you. Because she might not be beautiful for me, but if she's beautiful for you, then you marry her. But the question is, do you love her? Which means, are you willing to lay your life down for her? Because I'll tell you what, she's going to make trouble for you. So make sure you answer that and you're clear to that. And don't you dare walk in there with these romantic notions that all's going to be bliss because you're just in love with her. In other words, when she starts doing things that you don't like, do you love her? And are you willing to die for her? If the answer is yes, then you can get married. The second thing you have to answer is, do you have faith? Because you're going to meet issues and problems. And there is nobody who ever got married to a woman who had enough money to take care of that woman. And wait till you have children. And you're going to need faith to believe that God is for you, not against you. God will meet you and provide for you. God will take care of you. If you cry out to Him, if you pray to Him, and if you ascribe to Him, and if you obey Him, He'll be there for you, and you're the leader. And if the answer to those two questions is yes, go marry her today. No one can decide that for you. Not your mom. Don't listen to her. Because I have 3 boys. How many of you know if you have 3 girls, the dad always has issues about who they're marrying? Because there's no man as good as he is. And when you have 3 boys, the mother always has issues because there are no girls too good as her. And I always told my boys, don't listen to your mom, listen to their advice. But if you're marrying a believer, washed by the blood of Jesus, and you love that face, and you're willing to love her with all your heart, and you have the faith to believe that God will be with you, go get married. You're going to be fine. I've been married 34 years now, and that's all I have. It's the face that I love to see every day. Maybe not the face you want to see, but certainly the face I want to see. So impartation is very important. I have to sit down with Tony and tell him, you got to understand this. Tony, you can't live on 100% of your income. You've got to tithe 10% of that. You've got to support campus missionaries. You've got to support missions because it didn't say tithes, it says tithes and offerings. And you may not start at 20%, but certainly you can start at 12 or 15%. And if you're smart, you're going to set aside another 10%. Because if you keep that 10% going for X number of months, you're going to have 10 months and you got 100%. In other words, you only live on the rest of that. If you set aside 30% and give that to the Lord and save 20%, then you've got 70%. Live on that, because if you can't live on that, Tony, you won't make it. And you don't have to have a big salary. You just have to have the right life. If you can't make 10,000 ringgit fit every month, you're not going to make 20,000 fit. I don't know the valuations, but the point is, whatever little money you have, you got to live within those means. These are impartation issues. Tony, you got to have friends. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Amen? It's kind of like being with Christ. It's not that you know a lot about Christ. It's that you know who Christ is. In our context, our leaders are trained. Yes, you have to study. Yes, you have to have theology. But you will not remember all of these. And most of all, you're not going to be that good at all of these. But if you're smart, you may not be the best in theology, but if you have the 5 best theologians in your phone, then there's just one phone call away and you'll understand the verse that you didn't understand. Amen? You may not be the best at maintaining buildings, but if you have friends that are good with buildings, then you will never have a building problem. Because it's about relationships. And these are impartation things. These are teaching Tony, this is how you think. It's beyond just the rudiments of my function as a preacher and a teacher and a pastor. And finally, internship, where he's actually sitting there. Whenever I train leaders, I take them aside, and I've done this multiple times now. I take a younger leader, and he sits there while he watches me, and then he does my transitions, and I kind of invest in him to do a lousy job and blow things up, but it's a moment for me to correct him. I'm doing one right now with a guy named James. James has an interesting story because he's Filipino, but he was a child out of wedlock. His mother went abroad to Africa and had a romantic spree and came back, told her husband she was pregnant, and she said, we have a new baby, trying to pass off the baby as his. Unfortunately, when the baby came out, he was as black as an African. And out came James. And you can imagine the kind of things that are in his soul. Grew up in a school in a Philippine context and was teased to death and got saved through our ministry and became extremely fruitful in campus ministry that he got identified. And he's now actually with me. He's actually does my transitions. He's about to be launched out. He's about to be sent out because I've been interning him. I listen to every word he says, every little detail. Sometimes he says, I go there and I come here. I come there and I go here. He gets that interchanged. You don't come there, you go there, okay? And you come here, you don't come there. You know what I'm saying? So as a leader, I'm sitting down here. At the end of every service, I'm going to grab him. I'll say, don't do that again. Or one time he got up there, it was just New Year's Day, and he said, New Year's Day, it's just the first Sunday after New Year, and he was talking about fasting. How many of you know that's not a good idea? So I had to pull him aside and say, James, don't do that again. No matter how powerful your word is, no one's listening to you because they're all stuffed with turkey. But the point is internship. Leadership requires time. It requires training. It doesn't happen overnight. Gone are the days where you say the faithful, the available, and the teachable. That will work for volunteers in church, not for church leadership, quote unquote. The real church leadership, where you need something a little bit more than just the guy who's willing. I want to read to you how I believe you identify leaders. Psalms chapter 78, verse 70, he chose David his servant and took him from the sheepfolds. Interesting that when God chooses a leader, one of the greatest leaders of Israel, it says he chose David as a leader. And the basis for his choosing was not David's talent. He was actually an obscure shepherd boy taken from the sheepfolds that nobody knew. Nobody had any idea about his talents, his warlike abilities, his leadership skills, his ability to administrate. But God chose him because he said, I chose my servant. You choose people because they know how to serve. You choose people because you see them at the forefront of service. Whenever I look at a leader, that's the first thing I'm looking at. Does this guy understand what it means, how to serve? Does he have a heart of a servant? Or is he always wanting just the microphone and the speaking, and does he serve? And you need to be able to discern that. I have a whole message on that, but I'm not going to take all that time to talk about that. But the point is distinguishing a person and looking and checking for that heart of servanthood. Secondly, he says in verse 71, following the nursing ewes, and he brought them to shepherd Jacob, his people, Israel's inheritance. The second thing he did was, he was watching, the Lord was seeing how David was taking care of the nursing mothers of the lambs. If you know, that's not an easy thing. I think it was Pastor Gary who talked about, I don't want to take care of the baby lambs. I don't want to take care of the urine and the poop and all of these things. Bible says that David did that. And that to me is not just the ability to be of service, the calling to serve. That's what I'm looking for a human being, for a leader. Are you called by God to serve? And do you understand that's what the calling means? The second thing I'm looking for is there compassion? Is there a willingness to suffer? Do you know what that looks like when people are suffering? I so loved the mix of speakers in your conference because you can hear the heartbeat. You can see the compassion. You can see the willingness to suffer with. And that's an important facet of Christian leadership. In fact, not just Christian leadership. Good friend of mine, Sam Chand, once says, you cannot lead without understanding pain in leadership. Leadership always has pain. Your ability to withstand pain is a determinant of how well you're going to be as a leader. You don't have to look for pain as a leader, you're going to have it. But the ability to understand, manage that, and go beyond that, despite the experiences of pain, your ability to have compassion is going to be a basis for your success as a leader. And finally, it says, with an upright heart, rather, he says, with an upright heart, he shepherded them and guided them with a skillful hand. The last two things I look for in leadership: you may have been a calling to serve at a certain level. That may qualify you as a leader. You may have the ability and the desire for compassion. But that verse actually says, with an upright heart, which talks about something beyond just serving or calling to serve. Compassion, it talks about character. I hope you understand my handwriting. And that's what I'm looking for. Integrity. I think it was Pastor Jeff who talked about that this morning. Trustworthiness. People will only invest with you if they see the trustworthiness. Reliability. Do you arrive on time? Because that matters. Dependability. Your ability to not just be able to suffer with people. There are people who are good at serving. They're always at church. They're always serving. They're very compassionate. When somebody's having a hard time, they're there. But when it comes to other things that they don't like, they're not there. Amen? And that's not what leadership is. Leadership includes character of doing the stuff that you don't necessarily want to do. You still have to lead. And finally, the word skillful hands, which is competence. I'm looking at competence for the job that they're about to do. So I have people who come up to me and says, I think God's called me to be a pastor, and I've been serving at church. Great. I'm glad that you are. All of us should be serving at church, but you don't have to be a pastor to do that. Just be a Christian. No, but I feel like I'm called by God into full-time ministry. Great, I see that you have compassion. I see that you have character. The problem is you don't have the competence. It's kind of like somebody coming up to you and saying, I think God's called me to be a worship leader, and every time she sings, everybody wants to go home. I don't care how much she wants to serve. She's not singing on stage because she's not competent. You see, Christians have this idea, this false notion of just it's all about the heart. It is all about the heart, but at some level, just because you have all the heart doesn't mean we got to make room for you because of your gifts. The big mistake of churches is we always say, let's make room for people for their gifts. I don't think that's the way it works. If we made room for everybody just for their gifts, then everybody would be on stage. And what if we only need one guy to sing? It doesn't work that way. And so identifying leadership is really figuring out who they are before you set them in a position. And here's the reason why. Because leadership is not easy. Leadership is not a simple matter of just being kind-hearted or nice-hearted. And that's a prerequisite. That's important. You shouldn't be looking at a leader who doesn't have those basics. But they do require character and competence. They do require an ability to, particularly when things begin to scale. Now, in my context, leadership is so important because it really ultimately just is responsible for two things. I'm going to talk for another few minutes, and then if you have a question, just write it down. It will probably lead us on another track of discussion. Leadership is designed to build two things: culture and structure. I define culture as the thing that people do without thinking. If you want to build a healthy organization, a healthy family, a healthy church, whatever it is you're trying to build that's organizational, or for that matter, if you want to build a healthy life, you want to have healthy culture and a healthy structure. Culture is the spirit. It's the thing that you don't see. Structure is the body. It's the thing that you see. Robert Coleman said, a spirit without a body is a ghost. A body without a spirit is a corpse. In other words, you need both. Good leaders wake up every day thinking of two things. They should be called to leadership They should have the compassion as leaders. They should have the character as leaders. And they should have the competence as leaders to do two things: build a healthy culture and a matching structure for their organizations. If you look at any hotel, any corporation, the reason why these guys are successful and can scale is because they have a healthy corporate culture and a healthy structure, corporate structure that matches that culture. Same with you. You may have the healthiest spirit. If you don't have a healthy body, you cannot cause that spirit or that value that you have to be repeated all the time. You need both. It's wine and wineskin. Spirit or culture is the wine. Wineskin is the bottle. If you have wine without a bottle, how many of you know your wine's going to be spilled and useless? If you have a bottle without wine, there's no point in having one. In other words, 70% of the business of leadership is building culture. 30% is building the structure. Structure does not build culture. It aids in expanding and growing culture. Cultures build structures. If you go to Singapore, the structures that you see there were not built by the structures. They were built by a culture that made those structures the way they are. Culture inevitably will deliver the structure. And the structure allows you to keep repeating that until it's time to expand the structure once again. The other final illustration would be the light bulb and electricity. Culture is the electricity, the power that causes you to have the ability to switch the light on. But if you don't have a light bulb at the end of that electricity, then all that electricity is for naught and wasted. On the other hand, if you have multiple light bulbs but you don't have any electricity, you still have something that's useless. So herein lies really the predicament and the role of every leader. Build a healthy culture and build a healthy structure. The ingredients for culture are values, vision, and language. Over time, becomes the thing that people do without thinking. When you look at any culture, Philippine culture, Malaysian culture, French culture, American culture, the culture of Google, the culture of your church, the culture of my church, the ingredients that build the thing that they do without thinking are their values, their vision, and their language. Philippine culture is rooted in what people value, the way they see life, and a matching language that causes them to, over time, build the thing that they do without thinking. All cultures. I was just in Paris with my wife, no more than 2 weeks or what is it now? It's a month ago. And when you look at French culture, it's rooted in what they value. And those values cause them to see life from a very different set of lenses. La vie en rose. Rose-colored glasses, right? And the language that perpetuates that culture, it's the same with any organization. There's certain words that I can say to you that will be so funny to a Filipino, but will mean nothing to you, and a Malaysian guy can stand up here and say the exact same word with the exact same type of word with your language, and you all laugh. Why? Because there's a language that resonates to a certain people, a certain culture. Churches and organizations will have to have a language that they use. These are languages, 4 E's, 4 I's. These are languages of our church. They won't make sense to you. To our people, they make total sense. Good leaders create good language. Because a language is what creates culture, or the thing that people do without thinking. I think both men spoke a lot about language and the importance of language. The English language is not a language that necessarily creates culture. The English language actually has less than 20% of the world speak English. We're a minority. Once you go to China, most people don't speak English. Once you go to the Middle East, most people don't speak English. The English language is a language for wider communication. It allows us to exchange ideas. If you're a doctor but you don't speak in English, you're not going to be a very good doctor, because you're not going to have the ability to exchange ideas in various cultures and settings. Culture, languages, in other words, if you were Palestinian and you spoke in English, it doesn't mean that you value American things. You might actually be speaking in English but still bomb the U.S. Embassy, amen? Because language that creates culture is personal. And church leaders need to understand that. You need to be able to speak a language to your people that connects. Not the words that I use, your language, the way it will be said to them. The ingredients for organization structure are organization, system, and process. The best picture of that would be you. If you're building an organization, you're building a body. A body is an organism. It's a structure. It has a bone structure. Within that structure, you have systems. Respiratory systems, digestive systems, reproductive systems, immune systems, nerve systems, waste disposal systems, multiple systems that overlap over each other, that have processes within those systems. That organization, those systems, and those processes allow you to keep repeating the values and the vision that you want to see happen in your church. Does that make sense? So in essence, a leader wakes up in the morning dipsticking his culture. What are the values? What is the thing that my organization values? How do my people see life? And am I communicating it in a way that they will understand? Is my organization and my system and my process working? How are my volunteers recruited? Every day, and I wake up as a leader and look at the church or my organization or my family for that matter, I'm looking at that. Am I operating on the right values? Am I operating with the right vision so that people see it? See, in Matthew 6, Jesus says, where your treasure is, or where your values are, there your heart will be also. The main ingredient for culture is values, because whether you like it or not, what you value is what you will end up doing. 100% of the things that you and I do are based on what we value, even though we don't realize that's the way it is. Everybody just has 24 hours in a day. The fundamental difference between one leader and the other is one guy spends on the wrong values, and the other guy puts the time in the right values, and that's why at the end of the day, they have two different cultures and two different results. Nobody has 25 hours, nobody has 26. It's the ability to crystallize and detail. That's why I thought this was going to be a very small meeting. Because the reality is there are not very many leaders. But good leaders, and one telltale sign that this is not for you is if you're getting bored. Because this is actually very exciting to a leader. Because these are the secrets to building good leadership. Is knowing culture, how you value things. Values are so important because they trigger the essentials in life. The more you talk about values, people will just rise up and do it. You don't have to tell them. If people value something, you don't have to tell them to do it. They'll do it. The question is, are you able to crystallize the essential values for you to be able to cause your leaders to, or your people to behave that way? Values are interesting. Jesus said you cannot serve both God and money. That conversation is not a simple conversation or a theological conversation. While it is, that's a values conversation. Jesus was actually saying one of those is more valuable than the other. God is infinitely more valuable than money. He's trying to tell his disciples, you got to learn how to understand that one thing is more valuable than the other. And by the way, don't dismiss this question very quickly. Some Christians say, no, I don't value money more than God. I actually value God more than money. Well, let me frame this for you in the proper question. Do you think that if you had more money today, you would have less problems today? Because if the answer to that question is yes, then you just might value God more than money. Do you actually think that if you had more money today, you would be more happy than you are? Because if the answer to that question is yes, then you probably have an inkling in your soul that believes that money is like God. And so answering this question is so important. You can't serve both God and money. Then he follows that up with the second question. He says, isn't life more important than food? So he gives you this idea that one of those is more valuable. How many of you know life is more important than food? But we behave and eat like food is more important than life. So these are easy things to say, but when you really boil them down to actual cultural behavior and values, they're not. And the leadership role is to create those values so clearly in the minds of people that that culture is established. Isn't your body more important than clothes? Jesus, by the way, was not saying that money, food, and clothes was not important. At the tail end of Matthew 6, he actually says, if you get your values right and seek the kingdom first, I would add all these things to you as well. His point was not to say that one was not valuable. His point was to say that one of those is more valuable. And if you're going to be a good leader, you're going to have to understand how to evaluate and value things properly, because that's the main ingredient for creating culture. Amen? Now, in order to understand that, he began to say, God, by the way, I have a question for you. Where do you find money, clothes, and food in perfect harmony? In the malls. What's inside the mall? Money, food, and clothes. Why are the malls filled with people and churches are not? Because that's where their heart is. Amen? That should be simple enough. You see, this is not even complicated. I figured this one out, actually, not by reading my Bible. I figured this one out from 29 years of praying for prayer envelopes. Because every time I got stacks of prayer envelopes, I would read them, and I realized they were about money. They were about things they enjoy. They're not being fulfilled. I don't feel good. I'm not feeling fulfilled. It was about clothes, things, cars. It probably was about insurance, but it was about money. It was prayers about God. It was prayers about health. And it was prayers about relationships. And after 10 years, I realized it's the same prayer every week. In other words, while we're all different, we're all the same. While we all have different keys, we all have to have keys. Amen? So the universal reality is values are going to be there. The more you understand values, the more powerful you're going to be as a leader. Let me explain. If you find a person who's godly, who's very good at relationships, and looks like he's healthy, and he's good with financial management, and he looks like he's enjoying himself and he's fulfilled, and at the same time he's excellent, how many of you know you're going to follow that leader without you even realizing why? Because you see the value. Let me give you another example. Every time I preach on a Sunday, I always preach about these 6 things. When I preach, I say, okay, I always start with my preaching. I always reference things about God, things about relationships, things about health, things about money. And when you find a businessman falling asleep in my service, the minute I say, I was just reading an article in Harvard Business Review, you can see his head swing up like this. And when I say Fortune magazine, it swings out twice. Because when you speak of values, you're not speaking to their heads, you're speaking to their hearts. I told you the example of the guy who wanted to leave my church because the music was so loud. When I told him that your grandson's faith is on the line. His musical preference, his body, and his preference took a back seat. Because there is such a thing as hierarchy to values. Certain things are more valuable than others. So when you look at the values hierarchy, God life, which is the word not zoe, not bios, but the word suke, which means that which has breath, your relationship, that face that you see every morning, your marriage, your children. Soma, your health, your security. Money, food, the thing that you enjoy, and clothes, and we will touch on things later on. That's the hierarchy, isn't it? The very essence of values is hierarchy. And if you as a leader don't understand that, then you don't understand how values work. Certain things are more valuable than others. The more you understand the value of a particular thing, the more you're going to be able to evaluate the lower values. If you don't understand the value of the euro, you're going to have a wrong valuation of the ringgit. The ability to evaluate the lower values is to know the highest value. In other words, if you don't know the value of God, you're going to get this mixed up. The job of leaders is to present that. That's what your speakers saw earlier today. They didn't just talk to you about theology, they showed you the values. That's why it connected. It spoke to your heart. That's the essence of value. A cultural leader keeps creating that. That's what you do. How do I get my people to think this way? How do I get my people to be touched by the values that they need to have? I think both leaders spoke of values today, because the Lord's bringing this up. By the way, the gospel is a values message, in case you didn't know. God, who is the most valuable, so valued you, He gave you Jesus, who was most valuable to Him. Your value is not because you're valuable. Your value is because God, who is the most valuable, so valued you, He gave you Jesus, who was most valuable to Him. In other words, you're like a painting that nobody wanted, and some billionaire walks in and said, I like that painting, and everybody in the art shop looked around and said, we also like it now, and nobody actually liked it before. But if the guy who walked in was nobody, then nobody cares. The gospel is a values message. Why is it that values resonate to us? It's because that's how God wired us. We are wired on the inside like that. We're not changing that. Our job as leaders is to align the right values, because people value clothes more than God. Fashion, hello. The number one thing visited on the internet. Food and enjoyment, pornography. It's a values-driven world. And leaders are clueless what they're fighting against. They're fighting culture. And they're not able to present their God in a manner that's worthy to tell people this is where the real values are. That's how it works. Values have a hierarchy. That's the first rule. By the way, when the planes hit the Twin Towers in New York, for about a month, the Food Channel had to shut down. David Letterman, which is about food and fun, had to go off air. Fashion took a back seat. The stock market closed the longest during that period, except for the 1927 crash. Money, food, and clothes took a back seat because people were looking for God, relationships, and bodies. Because when push comes to shove, those are the real values. And guess who knows that? The church. But the church does not know how to communicate it, the language in which the world can accept it. Leaders need to understand that's the game. Why don't people come to church? They don't see the value. They think it's boring. They actually think the people are KJs. They think it's too stodgy. They think it's too old. Why are they all in the malls? They see the value. Why is the church losing ground? And people would rather watch a football game on a Sunday than go to church? It's values. And the day that the church cracks that, I love the picture of our youth services. My son will be speaking here tomorrow. When you come to our Saturday youth service, 30 minutes before the service, there's a line that literally snakes around our building. Because the kids know that if they don't get in, they won't have seats and they're going to have to go to the next service. It's like they're going to Star Wars. They see the value. What we do is we take our product and say, you want this, you go eat this. No. Figure out how I present this in a way that's valuable to them. Leadership dipsticks the culture. Now let me give you an application to this. Let's say you're running a church. Our church has 170 services. Let's imagine that each service has 30 children's church teachers. For example, that's about 3,000, 5,000 volunteers. Worship team of about, let's say, 10, divided by 2 services, 170 divided by 2. So let's just say there's 60 times 10. You got 600 worship leaders, ushers, and all that. You're talking about thousands of people that volunteer. If none of those guys see value in it, you won't have the volunteers, or you're going to have volunteers who are not enjoying themselves. Make sense? So when you design a volunteer program, you got to make sure that volunteer program is godly. You got to make sure that that program is bringing relationships together. You got to make sure that it's healthy and sustainable. You got to make sure that they're not spending their personal money unnecessarily. You got to make sure that it's enjoyable, and you got to make sure it's excellent. Now you're probably wondering, how did clothes become excellent? Because clothes are things. And when it comes to things, the value is never in the utility of the thing, but in the excellence of a thing. Let me explain. You can have 2 chairs. Both have the same utility. It's for sitting down. But one is more expensive than the other because it's more excellent than the other chair. The value of 2 shirts is not that they're both shirts. Amen? It's one is more excellent than the other, hence more value. In the lower values, the issue is excellence. So when you're creating value, how many of you know there's value in things that are economic, money? There's value in things that are enjoyable, and there's value in things that are excellent. Most Christians didn't understand Matthew 6 and say, no, this is about God. No, God, Jesus never said these are not valuable. He said He's going to add those things to you if you prioritize it right. So we dispense of excellence, we dispense of enjoyment. People come to church and it's so boring. Hello? I think it was Pastor Jeff who said, the church that worshiped and then slapped hands and worshiped and slapped hands. How many of you remember what he said? And people just saying, what in the world is this? It's not enjoyable. It's weird. They don't see the value. So this is a lot of what I do, and I'm going to stop in about 2 minutes here and pause because this is a class I teach for a few days and break this down into different facets of what does it mean. How do you overlap this value? Let me give you one last point before I drop off. If you have God and life without body, your situation is unhealthy. Your culture is unhealthy. If you have God and body without life, your situation is dead, lifeless, pointless. In other words, values overlap. You can't do one without the other. There is a hierarchy that's obvious, but you cannot not have one without the other. If you have life and body without God, you're cursed, you're unblessed, you're ungodly. If you have money or economics with enjoyment, without excellence, you have mediocrity. It's just a matter of time before somebody stops paying you. And when somebody stops paying you, you're going to lose your enjoyment as well. If you have economics and excellence without enjoyment, you have burnout. People are going to quit on you. If you have excellence and enjoyment without economics, you have poverty and lack. You can't sustain it. Good leaders wake up every morning dipsticking their culture. they're looking at all of these facets. In fact, I dare say that's about 70% of what they do is build a culture, create a relational culture, create a godly culture, create a healthy culture, create an economically sound culture, create a culture that's enjoyable, create an excellent culture by being excellent yourself. Embody these values in yourself, and then you become an agent to building the culture of your organization. That is 2 minutes. I'll pause here if you have any questions. Yeah. I mean, there's much to say here, much to say there, but we're just a little too much for an hour. Pastor Bernard, Pastor Chris, do I pause now, or do you want to go open forum? Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, insights? I also want to learn. I mean, if you have. I know it's a little wild because it's very, when I do this in class, the class always, I never thought of it that way. But leading based on values works because people will always, if we're to be honest with ourselves, what we do is what we value. That's the simple message. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, my name is Patricia. I just have an inquiry. You mentioned about as leaders, we need to tap into our value and in a way reach out. Say for example, the youngsters, the youth. Okay, it's just a concern that I have. It's just an inquiry. If let's say we were to adjust our programs or the way we song lead and encourage them to come, the only concern I have is, do we lose out in terms of, see, when you really know God and when you really, understand His depth and, that part of it, will they come because of the excitement of the program or because they come because they want to, I'm hungry for Jesus? That's the only
Excellent question.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an excellent question, because what she's saying is if we go the route of just making people enjoy, then people will come because of the enjoyment and not for God. Okay? Well, the simple answer to that is the difference between fishing at sea and fishing in a pond. So when you go out to sea, it actually becomes more expensive and more cumbersome, if not more dangerous at times. So you're empowered to go, because the sea would be the world out there. All of you will go out to sea as individuals working in your workplaces. So there's no danger there because you're going to a part of the sea that you're accustomed to, right? But the fact of the matter is, the majority of people who get saved get discipled in the church. That's the pond. So in other words, sometimes you take the fish into your pond and grow them there because it's much easier to fish in a pond. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, you can either go the route of blocking people into your ponds, and hence you have to keep going out there and fish out there. Or you can open your pond and get them in here, as dirty and as ugly and as smelly as they are, but it's easier to fish them because they're inside your pond. So it's a value thing. You have to decide, okay? Would you rather keep your theology that says, I'm not teaching them, or am I willing to take a risk and get these? What's Jeffrey said? They're going to be in your boat, they're going to be smelly, they're going to be ugly, they're going to have long hair, they're going to have demonic t-shirts, amen? They're going to be in slippers, not like you. So you decide where your theology wants to take you. Do I want my enjoyable church, or do I really want to fish the world? So, instead of me going out there and fishing and sending out big vessels for outreaches and funding them, I just create multiple ponds. So they end up in my pond, and I got 90 minutes of valuable moments to get that message into them. The chances of them getting saved are higher in my pond than if I had to chase after them in a football field. So, but that's theological and philosophical. Are you building the church for the 1,000, 6,000, 10,000 you have, or are you building it for the 5 million who are not yet here? I can't answer that. That's your question. That's your problem. As a leader, you have to answer that. So, a guy who's building for the people inside the pen will have 3-hour worship and make everybody happy here, but everybody who's from there who comes in here wants out. Because you valued your precious liturgy of sorts versus the lost. So it's a decision you have to make. I'm not saying one is wrong and the other is right. I'm just saying it's philosophical. And that's the job of leadership, is to decide that. A lot of people accuse us of very shallow messages. Why do you use screens? Why do you use clickers? Why? Because that's the fish pond wants that. And so if you want to stay with us and build to reach more, then stay with us. If you think we've already done with you and you want to grow somewhere else that worships 3 hours every service, then you're free to go. We have a big door in front and we have a big door at the back. We're not a cult. We're disciples of Christ. If you want to stay with us, and we'll keep reaching the lost and disciple them. Does that answer that? Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just one question. Brilliant insight. I felt like a whole MBA in one session that we learned. Yeah. The 3 circles: economics, enjoyment, and excellence.
Yep.
Okay, totally agree, very important. But how do we strike a balance? Because if it's too enjoyable, they would say you're flaky.
Yep.
If it's too excellent, then some people say that you're working very hard and there's no fun in it.
Yep.
And if you're all just talking about economics, then they say that,
all money.
all money.
Yeah.
So how is it to strike a balance and also to constantly readjust, realign your team?
I think the starting point is what Pastor Jeffrey said. Your key is the same as mine, similar, but I didn't do justice because I didn't have the time. I teach this for 6 hours just on values. All right, so I was jumping all over the place. There's a lot of verses on values. You're actually going to be amazed at how many of them there are. So one of the fundamental rules of values is, number one, there is a hierarchy. No, number one, it's just of the heart. That's why when Jesus said, you can't serve God and money, he said, you will hate one and love the other. Those are not mental things. Those are heart issues. Values, that's why leading based on values is amazing. Because when you're talking to people, they don't know what hits them. Because you're not talking to them here, you're talking to them here. So when you say something like what I just said about, for instance, I'll tell my church, the tsunami. During the tsunami, for 2 weeks, the value of bottled water shifted and were actually more valuable than cars and computers. Why? Because that's a values principle. In the world of values, values shift depending on time and season. So for instance, at Christmas time, what's valuable at Christmas time does not have value in January. Roses that are valuable in February 14 are no longer valued by February 15. Because in the world of values, you have to watch the time and the season. So for instance, you lost your job and you're a volunteer at church. So you love God, but you love your family, and you need to stop volunteering and start looking for a job because that's the value required at that time and season, because you have a head in your top of your body. And you're not just religious. Right? So that's how you determine it. The times and seasons will change this. As a church, there might be a time and a season where you need to sit down and get more strategic and less spiritual. That happened to us as a movement. We were so spiritual, we were exploding, but we couldn't manage the explosion because we were so disorganized. In your case, you may be extremely organized. I'm not saying you are or you're not. I'm just saying that you have to focus on shifting and looking at what is valuable in this season. That requires some prayer, some intercession, some consultancy. We had to bring in consultants and say, we need help. I mean, we're exploding here. We needed to get people to help us with our building plans and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because that was the requirement of the moment. So as a leader, that's why it's a deep hole to talk about this subject, because it's not a simple matter of just talking about it. There are so many concerns to leadership. And you wake up and you realize, you discern the values have shifted. They have to change right now. I just stepped down as the senior pastor of my church because I felt it was necessary for me to do it. They didn't tell me to step down. I went to them and said, it's time for you to take me down. Because I'm 59. And if I don't step down, this is going to get older. You're going to hear my son tomorrow. He's not the senior pastor. Another guy took over. But the point is, you need to discern the season. That's part of values. That's another key thing. Values shift. They adjust depending on the time and the season. And that's why as a leader, you're constantly dipsticking your culture. If you're running a company, I do this professionally with a handful of very senior CEOs that consult with me not as a Christian, but as a businessman. And I keep telling them, okay, you've grown your company, you've been through this entrepreneurial phase, that's done and over with. You got to shift now to a more serious, more institutionalized, because the seasons have changed on you. The volumes have changed on you. The values have changed on you, so you got to shift again. Does that answer that? Your acoustics must be extremely good here.
Hi.
Because when somebody speaks without a mic, you can't hear him. That means it's so airtight. Whoever built this, built it right.
Hi, Pastor Joey. My name is Ka Hui. I like what you say about culture driving the structure of a church or an organization, and the leaders spend 70% in the culture side. Have you come across a situation, or maybe how would you prevent whereby the structure begins to start to shape your culture and affects your culture? So how would you prevent that or avoid that? Or would you say it is unavoidable?
What do you do?
I'm a consultant.
Huh?
I'm a consultant.
So you know your stuff. You're actually answering your own question. You know the answer. I mean, it's just the way you frame the question. Well, obviously, you know the answer.
No.
I mean, structures tend to take over.
Yeah.
Most dangerous thing in the world is when the structure of the organization, because we want control. We're a people that want control. We want it. We become most insecure when we're out of control. And that's why God is so necessary, because He's in control. Our problem is because we can never predict Him, because He has infinite options. We don't want to trust Him because we want control. And so structures control. So once control happens, the tendency is to default to structure, which will affect culture, right? And it takes a brave leader to dismantle that.
Thank you very much.
Because that's what's going to happen. Because we are all control freaks. We all want structure because it's predictable. But the fact of the matter is, the world's not predictable. I mean, think about it. A few years ago, or not a few years ago, decades ago, if I wanted to call a girl, the phone rang, the father answered, and if the father said, "Can I talk to her?" No, that was predictable. Now, your daughter is talking to the boyfriend in the bathroom. You don't even know someone called. So the world's going to change. And the more it changes, the less control you're going to have, and the more insecure you're going to get. So you're going to have to trust God for that control. But what tends to happen is, and there's nothing wrong with structure, but once structure takes precedence over culture, you're dead. It's just a matter of time because you're now decaying. You're now trusting the light bulb without the electricity. You're now holding a bottle without wine. You've now killed the thing that can produce the future, which is why leadership is not easy. And that's why you have to pick the right ones. Because if you get the wrong one, you can't build it. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jack. Pastor, you mentioned Matthew 6:21.
Yes.
For where your treasure is, so shall your heart be. It's one verse which I often have trouble with. Can you expand a bit on how do you inculcate value in people? Because it's value that you mentioned that people will follow when you actually have value. So it's easy telling somebody, where your treasure is, so shall your heart be. So how do you, can you expand a little bit more on that?
How do you
Inculcate value.
I don't think I quite understand the question.
No, you say when you have value, people will follow as a leader.
It's the behavior. It's like your children. Do you have children?
No.
Okay. If you have children and you try to wake them up to go to school, you're going to have a hard time waking them up.
Yeah.
But when the premiere of Star Wars comes to town, they're going to be awake before you are.
Yeah. Well, how do you tell
It's
them that
because
school
of
is
value.
important?
They value enjoyment more than school.
Precisely.
Okay, so people are driven by values. It's the housewife who, when you come home, you need to get married and have children to understand this. You go home and they say, I don't feel well, feed your children, I'm going up to sleep. I've been taking care of them the whole day. She lies down in bed, opens the Straits Times or whatever it is you're reading here, and it says 70% off sale in the mall only today. And supernaturally, the Holy Spirit heals her. Right? It does not just heal her, literally transports her in the spirit and in the body, and finds her way around the traffic jam, and miraculously finds a parking space too. That's the power of value. People will do what they value. It doesn't matter who they are. Until the church understands that, you're going to miss it by a mile. So Jeff talked a lot about it. The kids left that church because they don't see any value and moved to his because they see the value. It's more fun here. It's just the way it is. It's just you don't fight it. If you want to fight it, go ahead and fight it. I'm just saying you're going to lose. The sad part is businessmen know that. The church doesn't get it. That's why businessmen work very hard to create value. And the truth of the matter is, it is the way God wired us. It's the gospel. It's about value. So let's take a case in point. Starbucks. The Chinese don't like the Americans, and yet next to the United States, it has the most number of Starbucks. How did it cross cultural boundaries? Values will cross cultural boundaries. I was just in Istanbul, Turkey. The Turkish don't like Americans, have the best coffee in the world, and yet have the biggest Starbucks right by the Bosphorus River. How did it cross that cultural boundary? Value. It's packed, by the way. It's 5 stories high. And it's packed. I couldn't even sit down. My wife and I didn't get a seat. We had to leave. You have to wonder, Turkey has some of the best coffee in the world, and yet it's packed. Because values traverses culture. Dim sum eating Taiwanese will eat McDonald's because of the value meal. Hello. That's just life. Don't fight it. Figure it out and do it. The reason why we don't want to do it is because we want control when the people are not looking for being controlled. They're looking for where is the value? Man, that was great worship. Unbelievable. In fact, my kids love this. You know, most of the people who come to our church are not impressed with my preaching. They're impressed with our kids' church. And because their kids are life, that which has breath, the second most valuable thing they have in their lives next to God, they'll leave your church and go to the one that has the best kids' church. Our kids' church, by the way, for every service, we'll have about 1,200 adults and roughly about 300 to 400 kids. The size of our kids' church is as big as the size of our auditorium. It's our way, you've been there. It's our way of telling our congregation, your kids are valuable. More valuable than you because they're the future. So when you start thinking as a leader like this, it changes the way you build church. I'll give you another key example. We built our churches to be smaller. Our new buildings, our old buildings used to be 1,200. We've scaled it down to 850 now. We're looking at one big one, but generally speaking, we're trying to make it smaller. Why? Because in the world of values, less is more. In other words, if you were talking to 5 people, you will feel valuable compared to if I was talking to 50 people. Now, if I was talking to one person alone, that person will feel extremely valued. So in the world of values, the smaller you go, the more value gets. The bigger you get, the lower the values get. I'm not giving you the answer. I'm giving you the principle. Figure out how you're going to apply that in your context. I'm just saying that in the world of values, that's how it works. If you have a table that has too many things on it, and you have a expensive ring and a cell phone, and you have a toothpick, and you have a glass of water, they all become the same value. The more you remove things from that table, the ones that are really valuable will stay and will be more pronounced. So in the world of values, small is big, less is more, slow is fast. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? It's actually the opposite. So that's why it's not easy. I don't know if I answered your question. Did I answer your question? Let me give you one concept in switching culture. Cultures are, you want to defend culture. Those are your values. The tendency of structure, which is your question, is to hold on to what's sacred, the practice, the thing we're used to, the thing that always worked for us. Of course, who in the world will want to try something that's never been proven? So the tendency of structures and leaders is to hold on to a prevailing value and culture and structure which minimizes or basically stops the growth. In order for you to change culture, you can't. Because in changing culture, you're taking something that's valuable away from somebody. That's the ingredient for culture. So if I try to steal this from her, how many of you know she's going to fight me? Because hold this, it's valuable to her. You can't, the reason why cultures can't be changed is because you're trying to remove values. And the reason why values will not be let go is precisely because they are valued. In order to change culture, you have to tell her, this iPhone is better than your Samsung. I know I'm going to start a war here, amen? But here's the point, okay? The point is, the only way you can change value is by presenting a better value. And even when you present a better value, it does not mean that to her those values are the same. It will take you months and years. That's why language is so important, because how you say it to her matters. Because if you say, I'll give you my phone, I'll give you the latest Samsung 10X. Okay? And she says, yeah, but all my contacts are there, and I actually like this sticker that's been here because it came from my grandmother. How many of you know it takes time to figure out people's values? That's why in the values-driven world, slow is fast. In the values-driven world, you empower your entire church so they're reaching out to different people, because ultimately all churches are going to be commoditized the same way that there are going to be low fares with flights. It's going to be a commodity. You can now just listen to anybody's podcast, listen to Hillsong. Churches are now online. What differentiates one church from the other is my friends go to that one. My friend is the one who brought me to church. Because ultimately, when push comes to shove, it's the presence of God and the relationships that are of the highest value. Wise leaders create a culture where people are empowered to build relationships inside the church. Because at the end of the day, the preaching of God's word will all be the same at some point. But that's why we built small. Why? Because if I have a small auditorium, then even though he's not the greatest preacher in the world, his members know he's available to them. Versus you've got the greatest preacher in the world, but I can never get hold of this guy. He's always too busy for me. So your value just went down. So you thought that you had great value because you had a great preacher, but that doesn't mean you should have a crappy preacher. That's not what I mean. You got to train your preachers to preach well. I'm just saying preachers have to be relational. So because you're just managing 2 services, you still do the funerals. You're present at there's the personal aspect, because that's valuable. So if changing this, for instance, I want to change this culture, I can't come to the center, because if I'm coming from a foreign culture, foreign values will be rejected by the culture. Right? The soil is going to reject the seed I'm trying to bring in. The culture, agriculture, soil, and seeds have to start in the periphery, where you take a small petri dish to design the new culture and the next evolution. Slow is fast, small is big, less is more. You take the prevailing values that you have and put them in this new petri dish, while you dispose of the values that have run their course. I'll give you an example. How many of you know that if you're still using a pager, the pager, those of you who are old enough, if you're still using one versus the cell phone, you are out of value already. If you're still using a Nokia, or you're using a Kodak camera, you're out of value. So you've got to get rid of the old values that are no longer valuable because the times and the seasons have replaced them, and take the core values that are unchangeable and put them in the new petri dish. And take the new values that are measured and applicable to your culture that you're designing, and you begin to now re-engineer and think through where the values are in this time and season. As you fix the new values and as you clarify them, by the way, that's one of the main roles of leadership, is to define clearly what your values are. You cannot make people understand your values if that's not even clear to you. As you grow this, you begin to eat the old culture and bring in the new into this new cultural reality. And you begin to evolve and grow and grow, and as that culture grows, it eats the old culture, and at the end of the day, you now have the new organization with a new set of values in the center. That's how you evolve it. Easy to draw, hard to do. And if you don't understand the principles, that it's a slow burn. So people that I consult with, I sit down with, basically half of the time I'm trying to tell them, slow it down. We're already slow it some more. Because in the world of values, slow is fast. The slower you go, the faster things get. The faster you go, the slower things get. Make sense? So you get, for instance, you want to change, I remember, this is a true story. I had expiring mileage, huge amounts of mileage, and I thought it would be a good idea to bring my kids and my wife to Japan from December the 26th to January 1st. This was the time when my children were not yet married. So I went to my wife and said, hey, sweetie, I've got so many expiring miles. We can all go to Japan. It would be lovely for the kids to have New Year in Japan, meet the church, and enjoy Japanese food. It's like being in a Japanese restaurant 24/7. My wife said, I don't want to go. Why? Because Joseph, life doesn't want to go. He's got a girlfriend, and he won't want to go, and I'm not going without him. Joshua will not go because of his girlfriend. You go alone. Why? I'm fighting a value. I'm fighting life, which says her kids are more valuable than me. Now, if it were Paris, it would be different. Now, here's the point, okay? So, if you want, you go with David. David's my businessman son who just got married. So what did I do? Culture builder, value creator, leader. I went to David. I said, David, do you know the biggest sushi restaurant in the universe? He says, no. David, the largest, best, freshest fish you'll ever see in your life is called the Tsukiji market. Hundreds of years old. Oldest fish market in the world. In the universe, Dave. Go Google it. So, I want to take you there. Really? When? This is June. Slow is fast, amen? I do this for life. This is a practice. I'm not just teaching this. I said, David, we could be there to 26th to the 2nd of January. Let's go. I'm so busy, I'm going to be drained by then, so let's go. We have a problem. Your mom doesn't want to go. Why? Because she thinks your brothers don't want to go because of their girlfriends. Okay? Said, so what do we do? Well, here's my proposal to you. Talk to Joshua. See, I could have held a town meeting. We're all going to Japan. I don't care what mom thinks. I don't care what you think. I don't care about your girlfriends. That's how most leaders do it. Wise leaders build culture. Wise leaders value members. Wise leaders build relationally. So he's lying down in bed. Josh, what? Have you heard of the biggest sushi restaurant in the universe? Language is important. And the language of value is what? Marketing. Amen? That's why they traverse cultures. Because they have the language of values. David, what are you talking about? Go to sleep. Shut up. No, I'm serious. It's called the Tsukiji market. Tsukiji what? Tsukiji market. Pop just told me. Look, come here. Look at this. He knows his brother loves ikura. Freshest ikura in the universe, Josh. Wow. So what's the big deal? Pop wants to bring us there. When? After Christmas. Really? Wow. Why aren't we going? Mom doesn't want to go. Why? Because of your girlfriend. Forget her. I mean, she can wait. It's not as if I'm going to disappear for a month. Now I've got two. I'm eating the culture. That's good leadership. Pop, Josh and I are willing to go. Great. You got to talk to Joseph. You know he wants to marry this girl. Sure. And I think you need to be the guys to do it. Okay. We'll take care of it. Sometimes as a leader, you got to trust your people. You got to build the right culture, the right values. By the way, here's the difference between manipulation and motivation. Here's the difference. Manipulation is it benefits you. Motivation is it benefits them. Before becoming a pastor, I was a businessman and I've been to Japan more than 20 times. I know how beautiful Japan is. And we have 9 churches there. I know how beautiful the people are. And I know that when they get there, they'll never forget it. That's not manipulation. Plus, I'm paying for everything. I'm motivated by the right reasons. That's good leadership. Your motives have to be right to begin with. So they go to their brother and say, Joe, let's go to Japan. We go to Chugei, same line. Oh, guys, I don't think Carla's going to like it. No, that's not going to work. Joe, this could be the last moment that you would be traveling with the family without your girlfriend. Life for life. Equal values. You know what? You're right, guys. Let me talk to her. You see, sometimes announcements don't work. Relationships always work. Because you valued him. Enough to hear you and enough to hear him. Values are so important, folks. It's not just something you say, it's something you live. That you actually value life. He talks to Carl and says, yeah, you should go. That's crazy. I mean, Japan's beautiful. To be with your parents, amazing. Go. I've got 3. All I need now is the queen. So I asked them, guys, talk to mom. So they go to mom and say, Mom, you know this idea of Pop? Yeah, we can't. You know, Joseph doesn't want to do it. No, we all want to go. Really? Okay, let's go. So go around. All of a sudden, she's planning the whole thing. In fact, today, everybody thinks it was her idea. Because it doesn't really matter whose idea is it, doesn't it? Because the job of leadership is not to tell everybody it's my great grand idea. The job of leadership is to move people from point A to point B. That's why you're the leader. The trip happened and the family enjoyed it so much that 3 years ago, the boys told their wives, you need to go to Japan, but don't you ever go there without my dad. And so on October 3 years ago, the entire family went. This time, it's no longer my idea, but theirs. Now they own it. Leaders are culture builders. Culture builders understand that the ingredient for that is values. When you create based on values, we've got it reversed. We think values and vision and values. Corporations think vision and values because they can't say values and vision. Because if they say values, corporate values are shareholders' earnings. It doesn't sound very nice. So as a corporation, they have to say vision and values. But that's inverted. It's values first and then vision, because what you value becomes visible to you, and what you don't value becomes invisible to you. When you don't value your children, they'll become invisible to you. They're just people that's supposed to follow you. But if you value them, you're going to have a real, meaningful conversation. It's kind of like my dog, Vito. Remember my dog? Years ago, I never liked dogs. They poop, they pee. For all the wrong reasons, I didn't want one. Or for all the right reasons. Until I bought my wife one and ended up falling in love with it. Now I sleep with him. Interestingly, when my values change, now I see things I never saw before. Now I see pet stores, pet resorts, pet toothpaste, pet food, pet leash. I see all kinds of things now that I never saw before that existed, not because I couldn't see them, but because they weren't in my value system. What you don't value, you don't see. What you value, you see. Our people, if you go to our church, every service, you're going to have people sitting by the staircase sharing the gospel to their friends because our people value the lost. We so value the lost that we don't care if you think our preaching is shallow because we use projectors, because we're not talking to you, we're talking to the lost. Values are important. And by the way, you can't value everything, because if you value everything, then you didn't value anything. You're going to have to make choices. And that's the job of leadership. Hence, fasting, praying, waiting, trusting in God. Process, don't be in a hurry. Values are not very quick. They're actually rather slow. 3:34. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening, Pastor. I'm Michael. Just a quick question. With the rapid change in the present age and time, and of course, I like the example you've given us about Starbucks and the other fast food that have, transfers nations. How do your church handle the vast and rapid changes in value so that you could stay in line and in the same direction without creating too much havoc in the system?
I think, first of all, you got to be convinced that God is supremely the most valuable. So if you're totally convinced, you cannot make people value something that's not really valuable to you. So if you're totally and thoroughly convinced, not just religiously or traditionally, that God is the most valuable, then you need to be able to answer, why is he the most valuable? Because the fact of the matter is, God answers life. My marriage will not be what it is if not for my relationship with God. My love for my children will not be what it is if not for my relationship with God. I wouldn't be healthy if not for the Word of God. I probably would be not eating right, sleeping late. My finances are the way they are because I've managed to apply biblical principles. My enjoyment is at a place where I know that it's number 5 in the highest. So I think you got to be convinced yourself about your product. Because if you're not convinced about your product, then there's no, how can you not be convinced about your product? It's the greatest product in the world. So I think if you're thoroughly convinced about that, then now, how does that now apply to them? And in large part, that's going to be vision and language. Can they see it? Because what people don't see, they're not going to value. If people see that their children are changing, if people see that the youth are changing, they're doing their homework better, they're discipled, they're having fun, then it becomes visual. And then the language has to change. The way you say things matters. Because if you're saying it in a way that doesn't connect, it doesn't relate. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I have a massive website. It's largely because the audience I have is there. So that's language, the medium I use, and it expands me because instead of just preaching once on a Sunday, I'm actually online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I think it's first knowing this is what I value. And now I want people to see it, and then I want to communicate it in the language that makes sense. And again, the idea is not to move quickly. The idea is to start moving very, very slowly. If you were to take a timeline here, that little center dot there is probably, once you even initiate the notion of transformation, that one right there is probably a good year. Most of that is probably just conversations. You're not even touching anything. You're just conversing. Many of the times that I've consulted with churches and non-churches, a lot of that is just helping the leadership understand where he wants to go and helping him clarify his thoughts. That takes a while. The second level is probably another year. That's probably about 3 years. This whole thing is probably going to be about anywhere from 7 to 10 years. So it's a very, very small movement. In fact, the best transitions are the ones people never feel. It's the abrupt transitions that create instability. When you want to transition something, I transitioned out of my position as senior pastor 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I stepped off and told the pastor, I'll keep the title senior pastor, you do the staff meetings. I said, I can't do that. I mean, these guys are not ready for me. Just sit there and just do it. So for about 4 months, I was sitting there, and then one day I called and said, I can't make it to the meeting today, run it. Huh? Yeah, just run it. You can do it. So in other words, transition slowly means you're valuing people. It's not about you. It's about them. So the staff get to like him and transition, and then finally, I just stopped showing up at the meetings. And then then we never announced it. In fact, we just kept doing like that for 4 years. 1 year, I was in and out of the meetings, and then after 4 years, I stopped attending the meetings. So everybody already knew that I was already out, even though we've never announced it. By the time we announced it, everybody said, yeah, we already knew that. Transitions are critical. So if your church is aging, for instance, and I don't know the situation, I'm just citing an example, you've got to be, that's why it's not a simple leadership session like this. This requires a lot of prayer, a lot of thinking through, a lot of analyzing, a lot of realizing that thing's over. And when you shoot something, what I call shooting the dogs, right? How many of you know churches have too many dogs? Too many things that are used to be very valuable but are now doing nothing but eating and pooping. You got to shoot some of the dogs, right? And before you shoot a dog, you better be very, very clear why you're shooting the dog. Are you here? It's probably lame and wounded already and time to go. And if you shoot that dog, expect people who love that dog so much, even though it's just an organ, hello, or a practice. So you got to be very careful and identify those guys are going to react. Let's have a conversation with them. Why do we need to move this organ here? Why do we need to do this? Why do we? It's a conversation. Somebody emailed me this morning in my website and complaining about how our nation was so divided over the elections. And I said, that's the history of Christianity. That's the history of Christianity. That's Catholicism, Protestantism, Reformation. That's Pentecostal, Baptist, Anabaptist, Unibaptist, all kinds of Baptists. That's Christianity. And you know what? Most of the time, it's not theological that they're fighting over. It's relational. Because people did not make the time to sit down and have a nice conversation. So people will tell me, okay, we'll hire you, make us call, study our, no, let's have a conversation. You don't even know me, I don't even know you. Let's just talk. Let's go to the beach. Because what you're telling him is, if you're going to want to shift your culture, you're going to have to learn value. And in the world of values, time is important. That means it's really important to you. You're willing to fly, you're willing to sit, you're willing to talk, you're willing to wait, you're willing to take notes, you're willing to pray. Because it's not just something you say. Values are not something you post in a window or in a wall. It's a behavior. Is it real or is it just something you're saying? So I've worked with churches that have 20 values in their worksheet, and I say, and I look at the leader and say, can you dictate for me your 20 values? And they can't even dictate it. You're the founder. You wrote this. So how real is real? And in the world of values, you're probably going to have to drop a lot of those and really keep a very few that you're really going to invest in and put your heart and soul into. But that has to evolve, and you can't do that overnight. It will be a mistake to do it overnight. Okay? I think I can't give you the specifics of number 1, number 2, number 3. That doesn't work that way. It takes months and weeks and days of speaking and talking and figuring out. One of the things I start off with people is, what's your one word? That alone will take you a year. I'm already telling you. Because you're going to have fights in your own soul about that. In order to bring clarity, the best exercise is to define your one word. That's you. That's your board. That's your key staff. That's your staff. That's your key leaders. That's your congregation. That's the government. That's the general public. Those are your publics. Every organization, every company has multiple publics. The way you understand what you understand and the way your board understands what you understand are not the same thing. The way your key staff and your board understand what you understand is not the same thing. It goes on and on and on and on. Unless you can define what your business is in one word and be clear about it, you're going to have a hard time traversing all of that. When you say Toyota, you know what the one word is. Right? Pizza, right? Of course not. Cars. Even sinful companies, you know what the one word is. Marlboro. How many of you know what it means? Cigarettes, Rolex, watches. It's clear. So because it's clear, everybody knows we've got to find the best parts to make the best watch. And to just be clear about that, I'm telling you already, it'll take you just a year. What do I mean by a Rolex watch? What do I really mean by that? And how clear is that in my soul? So when I say discipleship, what do I mean by that? Because that's our one word. So figuring that out will take you weeks and months because your job is to bring clarity. And if you're going to scale as big as Toyota, all these publics, the bigger you scale this, you're going to have to be clearer. And to be clear, you're going to have to be able to say it in one word, that the minute you say it, everybody understands what you're saying. That's where language comes in. How you say it matters. How many of you still want to become a pastor? It's not easy. This is above and beyond burying the dead, christening children, preaching on a Sunday, counseling people, managing the budgets, getting phone calls and emails of detractors. It's not easy, especially in this day and age with the social media and the internet, because now you're compared to other pastors. So what is the simplistic way to do life before has changed upon us. I hope I'm not sounding like it's dreadful. It really isn't. It's actually rather exciting. I'm just saying it's not easy. There was another gentleman that raised his hand, I believe. Yes, sir. Yes?
Excuse me, just get a mic to you and you can speak to the mic. Thank you.
Sorry, my name is John.
Hi, John.
I listen to all the things that you speak and share is tremendous. I mean, you can practically figure out how to handle any kind of situation, any church environment. How do you reconcile, let's say, when God's revival hits the church? See, when God hits, God changes the values of the people. I just want to have your opinion.
Well, I wouldn't know, because in 32 years of doing this, I have not seen a revival.
So we're expecting revival.
That's my point. I wouldn't know. So philosophically, I don't wait for revivals. I just wake up every day and create value. Many church leaders are waiting for revival to happen. I'm one of those that don't. I'm not saying there isn't one. I'm just saying I create value every day, and 30 years later, I've got more values. If I spend 30 years waiting for revival to hit, and it never hits, then I spent 30 years with no values.
Pastor, just a matter of clearing my mind.
Yeah.
We have heard so many prophecies and teachings about prophecies, and the wave of God is moving. And Asia is Africa. Now Asia will be the next move.
Yeah.
So of course, personally, I'm expecting a revival to hit the church, even in Malaysia. So all that you have shared is very valuable. I mean, I feel it's very valuable, how to handle, how to articulate, how to shift and all that. So don't you think that God hears our cry? Let's say Malaysia, for example, the condition of our nation. And when God hit us, don't you think that God will change the value of the whole church?
I don't quite understand. You might know something I don't, but
no,
I don't think people's hearts change overnight. I think people's hearts change through a process of time. Because I'd actually believe that the hardest thing to change is a man's heart. So I just don't believe in that philosophically. I just don't believe that that's the way it's going to happen. And so I don't want to say that it's not going to happen, because as you've said, it's been prophesied. One other thing is I use prophecy to confirm what God has spoken to me. I don't use it to direct my life. Does that make sense? I use it to confirm, and the final confirmation if it actually happens. I use it to confirm and to encourage me, not to direct me. I use values to direct me. So I don't wake up every day thinking, okay, is it revival time today? No, I wake up every day, am I creating value today? If it hits today, great. I'm in faith that it will happen, but even if it doesn't happen, I'll wake up tomorrow and create more value. So I use it as a source of encouragement. I'll use it as a sort of confirmation that God is working for us, but I'm not going to let it dictate the way I'm going to run my life.
Okay, I think we've got to come to the end of our session, because we've got to value Pastor Joey's throat and health. He's not been drinking water the whole time he's been speaking.
Yeah, it's all right.
Do you have time for one more? Or?
Sure.
Jimmy, just last question at the end, and then we're done for today. All right.
Hi, my name is Chu. In the past, a lot of pastors are pastors because most of the professional don't join the profession, or technically the service or whatever you call it. Today, because the world is a bit more complicated and you have all this technology, social media and so forth, in your selection of leadership or these leaders, potential leaders, how much do you value work experience? Because the relevance of the workplace from someone trying to so-called shared with the members, in whether in summons and so forth, brings about more reality in terms of experience, one. So in terms of how much do you value work experience in your selection of leaders? Number two, what is the composition of your leaders in your church that have some form of work experience and not just pure someone that came out from school or graduated and has never worked?
Our total staff composition for our church in Manila is about 700 people. So when we have a staff meeting, it's probably as big as this. We have it once a month. Half of those are campus missionaries that raise their own support. Kind of like Campus Crusade, except it's local church-based, it's not parachurch. Most of those, if not all of those, are fresh graduates. So half of our staff do not have work experience. And I agree with you that people who have work experience are a lot healthier than people who have not seen the world or are just living in a church environment that don't realize there's a world out there. However, our ministry's culture is not based there. In fact, those guys that have to raise their own support, they're out in the world because they're constantly going up to people and saying, would you support my ministry, which is tough. So there's an element of faith and selling and convincing and makes them stronger. So it's not about work experience just. I think it's culture. It's teaching. My son's never had a job. You're going to hear him tomorrow. And he's a very accomplished minister. He's actually the head of those 300 people. But he's never worked a job elsewhere, but he does have a work ethic. He does have the sense of values that we just talked about. He understands what are essential and what are not. So I don't think it's necessarily having to have worked in a secular setting that makes you a good leader. I've had the benefit of living in both worlds. I've seen extremely good leaders who've never have worked. The man who founded our church never worked a minute in secular work, but he embodies these values. In fact, many of the things I talked about, he would not explain this way, but a lot of these were really my understanding with the way he lived. I watched the way he lived and wondered, why is he so successful? And I realized it's because he was building this way. And so I hear what you're saying, but I don't think someone who's had an exposure in a secular job necessarily means that that person will be a better leader in the church world. I think church leadership, for instance, you don't have to be a good administrator to become a church leader. You just have to have an appreciation of administrators. I think many times church leaders, because they're not familiar with administration, they don't appreciate administrators. Good leaders don't have to be administrators. They just have to appreciate the importance of IT, of social media, and appreciating your team. So it's building the right team and appreciating the members of your team that will help you succeed, not necessarily having been exposed to IT and HR and finance in a secular setting. So those things can be handled through consultancy and various means. But I hear what you're saying. I'm just saying I'm not totally convinced that churches need to necessarily look at the secular experience of people to consider them as better church leaders, because I've seen church leaders who are a lot better than I am who've never had any secular work experience. So, thank you.